March 15, 1944. Japanese Naval Intelligence Headquarters, Oda Communications Unit, Japan. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara sat at his desk, staring at the intercepted transmission. His third cup of bitter tea had gone cold. For the last 18 hours, he and his top team of codebreakers had been trying to crack what seemed to be U.S. Marine Corps messages from the Marshall Islands campaign. But the strange sounds coming through their receivers didn't make sense. Besidi de Dickard. They weren't random. The rhythm and timing matched real military signals, just before American attacks, lasting as long as standard field orders, and sent on known Marine Corps frequencies. Everything fit, except the language. It was completely unbreakable. Unlike anything in their vast files on Allied communication systems, the message made no sense. Commander Atsuzo Kurihara led one of the most advanced intelligence operations in the world. His Oda facility, just 20 miles from Tokyo, had 500 staff members, 118 radio receivers, and 20 direction finders. His codebreakers had already cracked American diplomatic traffic, British naval communications, and several Army codes. Before Pearl Harbor, they had even broken the U.S. State Department's Purple Code, giving Japan vital intelligence in the early years of the war. But these Marine Corps transmissions were different. They were a total mystery, a complete cryptographic failure. 3 years into the war, after breaking dozens of Allied codes, Japan's smartest minds couldn't even find a basic pattern in these strange messages. What Kurihara didn't know, what no Japanese officer would learn until after the war, was that he was hearing the only unbroken code in modern military history. And that story didn't begin in the Pacific. It began in the deserts of the American Southwest, among the Navajo people, who for centuries had spoken a language unlike any other on Earth. Known as Dine Bizad, the Navajo language belonged to the Athabascan family. In 1940, it had about 170,000 speakers, almost all living on the 27,000-square-mile Navajo Nation, spread across Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado. The traits that baffled Japan's best cryptanalysts had evolved over thousands of years. Navajo is built around verbs, action words that change through intricate prefixes, creating millions of possible combinations. It also uses 4 tones, high, low, rising, and falling, that completely change word meanings. One small mispronunciation can make an entire sentence impossible to understand. The language includes sounds that don't exist in Japanese, English, or most of the world's tongues. Explosive ejective stops, wind-like fricatives, glottalized sounds, and nasalized vowels. For Japanese listeners, used to a language with only 5 simple vowel sounds, recognizing these was nearly impossible. But one man saw the power hidden in this linguistic maze. Philip Johnston, born in 1892 to a missionary family on the Navajo reservation, grew up speaking Navajo fluently, one of only about 30 non-Navajos in the world who could. By 9, he was translating his father's sermons. By 15, he was translating for Navajo leaders in Washington, even meeting President Theodore Roosevelt. Then came Pearl Harbor. In December 1941, as America reeled from the attack, Johnston read about U.S. Army units using Comanche speakers during training. The Choctaw had done something similar in World War I, but that effort was small and improvised. Johnston imagined something much bigger, a formal, fully developed military code built on the Navajo language. A code so unique and complex, it could never be broken, and yet simple enough for soldiers to use in the chaos of war. On February 28, 1942, Philip Johnston brought his bold idea to Major General Clayton Vogel at Camp Elliott near San Diego. The test that day was astonishing. 4 Navajo men from Los Angeles sent and received messages while Marine officers timed them against the standard military cipher machine. The results stunned everyone. The Navajo speakers took just 20 seconds, while the M209 cipher machine needed 30 minutes to send the same message. General Vogel immediately approved a small test program. On May 4, 1942, 29 Navajo recruits were sworn in at Fort Wingate, New Mexico. Among them were Chester Nez, Carl Gorman, Lloyd Oliver, and John Benally, young men from all across the reservation. Some had been punished in boarding schools for speaking Navajo. Others were shepherds who had rarely left their homeland. At Camp Elliott, these 29 men worked in a locked, guarded building for 8 weeks, building a secret military code from their own language. The job was massive. They had to invent Navajo words for military terms that didn't exist, design an alphabet system, make it easy to memorize, and allow it to expand for future use. They built the code using their culture's creativity. A submarine became Beshlo, meaning iron fish. A battleship was Lotso, whale. Fighter planes were Dehitaihi, hummingbirds darting through the air. Bombers became Jaysho, buzzards circling before diving. For the alphabet, they had to be even smarter. Each letter needed several Navajo words to avoid enemy code breaking through frequency analysis. For example, the letter E, the most common in English, had 4 Navajo equivalents: elk days, Irare, eat aja, and axed sa. Code talkers switched between these randomly, so no pattern could ever be found. In total, they created 211 original terms and memorized them perfectly. No codebooks were allowed, in case one fell into enemy hands. Chester Nez later remembered, "We drilled endlessly. A mistake could cost lives. In our culture, words have power. Speaking correctly was sacred." The first real test of the code came at Guadalcanal in August 1942. 15 Navajo Code Talkers landed with the 1st Marine Division. The Japanese had cracked most Allied communications before, but suddenly, Marine messages became impossible to understand. The enemy was listening, but this time, they were hearing a language no one on Earth could break. The Japanese 8th Fleet headquarters in Rabaul, chaos filled the intelligence room. Officers were desperately trying to make sense of the strange new American transmissions. Lieutenant Kazuo Yamada, who had studied at Stanford University before the war, examined the recordings and reported, "These sounds are structured like a real language, with rhythm and patterns, but it matches nothing. Not English, French, Dutch, Spanish, any Philippine dialect, or any Chinese dialect. It's completely alien." Japan's response was methodical. They gathered their top cryptanalysts, recorded hundreds of hours of transmissions on wax cylinders, and tested every known decoding method. They even brought in university linguists and Buddhist monks who specialized in ancient languages. Nothing worked. Then, on November 8, 1942, Navajo Code Talker Chester Nez sent artillery coordinates that destroyed a Japanese machine gun nest. His message took just 14 seconds to send. Japanese operators intercepted it, but to them, it was just meaningless noise. Minutes later, American shells hit their target with deadly precision. Colonel Haruo Kanuma, an intelligence officer with Japan's 17th Army, wrote in his report, "The Americans have created a code that defeats every attempt. We can no longer anticipate attacks. We are fighting blind." Japan's only hope came in the form of a captured Navajo soldier, Joe Kiyumiya, taken prisoner at Bataan in April 1942. He spoke fluent Navajo, but had no knowledge of the secret military code. When Japanese cryptographers began intercepting Navajo transmissions, they brought Kiyumiya to the Ono Interrogation Center and played him the recordings. He recognized the Navajo words, but they made no sense together. The turtle is attacking the iron fish. The hummingbird carries eggs. When he failed to translate, his captors accused him of lying. The torture escalated. He was beaten, waterboarded, and hung by his arms for hours. In the freezing winter of 1943, they forced him to stand naked in the snow until his feet froze to the ground. They starved him down to 90 pounds, offering food in exchange for translations. Through it all, Kiyumiya kept repeating the truth. He understood the words, but not their meaning. A Japanese intelligence report from May 1943 summed up their despair. The prisoner appears native to the mystery language, but cannot comprehend the messages. The Japanese intelligence report offered 2 possible explanations. Either the prisoner showed extraordinary resistance, or the enemy was using a special code built inside a native language that required specific military training. The second guess was right. Even fluent Navajo speakers couldn't understand the code unless they had been trained to use it. Joe Kiyumiya survived 3.5 brutal years in captivity. His inability to help convince Japanese intelligence that they were facing something entirely new, something beyond all previous experience. By late 1943, Japan had largely given up trying to break the Navajo Code. Meanwhile, the success at Guadalcanal changed everything. Major General Alexander Vandegrift wrote, "The Navajo communicators have proven invaluable. Their transmissions are faster than any encoding device and absolutely secure." A formal code talker school was soon established at Camp Pendleton, running new classes every 8 weeks. By the end of the war, between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines had served as code talkers across all 6 Marine divisions. Their training was unlike anything the Marine Corps had ever done. Recruits practiced inside soundproof booths, learning to transmit clearly under pressure while simulated battlefield noise thundered around them. They sent messages while wearing gas masks and kept running and talking even when exhausted. Thomas Begay, who enlisted at just 15 years old, remembered. They pushed us beyond what we thought was possible. Lives depended on our accuracy. The code itself kept evolving. New technology brought new words. The atomic bomb became Ayashar, meaning metal egg. Kamikaze pilots were Nati, meaning death wind. Every new term made perfect sense to Navajo speakers, but was totally baffling to outsiders. By mid-1943, Japan's intelligence agencies had poured major resources into breaking the code. The Imperial Navy's 4th Section assigned 30 full-time cryptanalysts to study the transmissions. Captain Yoshiro Tanaka tried every possible method. His team analyzed the musical tones of the speech, compared it to Native American recordings, and even consulted American-trained scholars. They built special machines to slow down the recordings without changing the pitch, hoping to detect patterns hidden in the rhythm of the language. Nothing worked. They even tried turning sound into pictures. Using oscilloscopes, Japanese analysts created visual patterns of the Navajo voices. They ran statistical tests on sound frequencies and repeated tones, looking for any kind of structure or code. Lieutenant Commander Masaru Yamada later explained that they did find some patterns, like possible call signs and a link between message length and operation size, but without understanding the actual words, none of it helped. Desperate, Japanese commanders issued new orders: capture Marine communication personnel alive. They even offered 10,000 yen rewards, about 10 years' salary, for any captured code talker equipment or materials. Several close calls happened, but no Navajo code talker was ever captured with his equipment intact. The next major battles proved just how vital these men had become. During the Central Pacific Campaign, the code talker's role was irreplaceable. At Tarawa in November 1943, 6 code talkers kept communications running through 76 straight hours of brutal fighting. Lloyd Oliver transmitted nonstop for 48 hours, guiding naval gunfire, while shells exploded all around him. In the Marianas Campaign, 24 code talkers worked around the clock at Saipan. Lieutenant Commander Takashi Harukawa had managed to decode some Allied messages before the invasion, but once the Marines landed, everything went silent. The Navajo Code had shut down Japan's ability to read the battlefield. Colonel Takashi Saito admitted, "Our commanders felt abandoned, cut off from the intelligence they had always relied on." At Peleliu, code talker Jimmy King transmitted for 6 hours straight during a counterattack after his partner was killed. Under direct fire, he coordinated artillery from 3 battalions, sending 40 flawless messages. And then came Iwo Jima, the moment that would define the code talker's greatest achievement. Major Howard Connor directed the entire opening assault on Iwo Jima using the Navajo Code. 6 code talkers, working in rotating teams, kept communications running nonstop during the invasion's most critical 48 hours. For 2 years, General Tadamaki Kurabayashi had turned Iwo Jima into a fortress, carving 11 miles of tunnel beneath the island. His defensive plan depended on intercepting American communications so he could launch precise counterattacks. That plan completely collapsed. In just 2 days, the 6 Navajo code talkers sent and received over 800 flawless messages. They directed the landings of 30,000 Marines, coordinated naval gunfire from 100 ships, managed air support, reported enemy positions, called for medical evacuations, and handled supply requests, all while shells and bullets rained down around them. Major Connor later testified, "Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. During the first 48 hours, I had 6 Navajo radio nets operating around the clock. They sent and received over 800 messages without a single error. The entire operation was directed by Navajo Code." Colonel Shigito Hayashi reported to Kurabayashi that the American code remained unbreakable. He noted that artillery requests sent in Navajo took just 20 seconds, while traditional systems took 30 minutes. The difference between destroying an enemy position or losing it. At Okinawa, the largest battle of the Pacific, 35 Navajo code talkers coordinated the movements of 183,000 troops over 82 days of combat. The Japanese tried radio jamming and even voice mimicry, but they couldn't imitate Navajo's unique tones. Lieutenant Hiroshi Miyamoto Japanese surrender. The message first traveled through the Navajo Code before any conventional channel, a powerful and poetic end to the Code Talkers' war. After Japan's defeat, American interrogators finally uncovered just how hard the enemy had tried, and how completely they had failed. Lieutenant General Seizo Arisu, Japan's chief of intelligence, confessed, "We never broke the Marine Code. We broke Army codes, Air Force codes, diplomatic messages, but the Marine Tactical Code was completely secure." Captain Yasuji Kawamoto added, "We recorded thousands of transmissions. Our best linguists studied them for 3 years. Nothing worked. It was our greatest cryptanalytic failure." By 1944, some Japanese analysts noticed that the language had tonal patterns suggesting it came from an indigenous American source. They even asked Germany for help, but wartime chaos and German ignorance of native languages stopped any progress. Colonel Masaru Yamada later admitted, "Our inability to read Marine communications cost thousands of lives." After 1942, every Marine operation was a mystery until it began. Major Hiroshi Tanaka, a survivor of Iwo Jima, described the deeper effect. "We couldn't understand their words. It made us feel primitive, defeated before the battle even started." But even when the war ended, the Code Talkers' mission didn't. Their work remained classified, kept secret for possible use in the rising tensions of the Cold War. S attempts to copy it, according to Code Talker Alfred Newman, sounded like someone gargling while trying to talk. And finally, on August 14, 1945, Code Talker Teddy Draper sent the message that ended it all. Nahima Idiigini Aidenil peace has been declared when the Code Talkers returned home. They couldn't tell anyone what they had done. Their mission was still secret. They came back to states that didn't even allow them to vote. Not until 1948 in New Mexico and Arizona, and 1957 in Utah. Many were denied service in hotels and restaurants. They were heroes who couldn't reveal their heroism. Chester Nez, the last of the original 29, who passed away in 2014, later wrote, "We were warriors who helped win the war, but couldn't tell anyone. The burden was heavy. Many found peace only through traditional Navajo healing ceremonies. The Enemy Way ceremony was meant to cleanse warriors from the spiritual harm of battle." Dan Erke explained it best. "We had used our language to direct death. We needed it for healing. The ceremonies reminded us our language was sacred." In 1968, the Code Talker program was finally declassified, ending decades of silence. A year later, in 1969, they received their first public recognition at a 4th Marine Division reunion. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan honored their legacy by declaring August 14th as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. And on July 26, 2001, President George W. Bush presented congressional gold medals to the original 29 Code Talkers in a moving ceremony at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda. Only 5 of the originals were still alive to witness the nation finally say the words it owed them for decades. "Thank you," President George W. Bush said it best. "Today we honor 29 Native Americans who gave their country a service only they could give." Chester Nez replied with humility, "We were ordinary men given an extraordinary task. We used our sacred language to help win the war. While the Navajos are the most famous, they weren't alone. 14 other tribes also served as Code Talkers. The Choctaw were the first to pioneer the idea in World War I. During World War II, 17 Comanche Code Talkers served in Europe, even landing on D-Day. The Hopi, Cherokee, Lakota, and many others also turned their ancestral languages into weapons of victory. The Code Talkers Recognition Act of 2008 finally honored all tribes who had contributed. As John Brown Jr. said, "They told us our language was no good. Then they needed it to win the war." Their work proved just how brilliant and complex native languages truly were. The Code Talkers had to modernize Navajo on the spot, inventing new grammar and metaphors to describe military concepts. Because Navajo is a agglutinative, a language that builds long, detailed meanings within a single word, they could express complex military orders in just a few syllables. As Dr. William Morgan explained, they proved indigenous languages aren't primitive. They showed Navajo could express anything, from sacred ceremonies to the science of warfare. The Navajo Code created a kind of cultural encryption, a security so powerful that no mathematical formula could break it. This idea even influenced post-war intelligence, and today, it still matters as quantum computing begins to threaten traditional encryption systems. Colonel David Hatch summed it up perfectly. They achieved something unique, a code never broken, never compromised. It proved that human language could surpass even the best machines. In the 1980s, Japanese scholars revisited their wartime failure to crack the code. Professor Tao Yoshikawa revealed that 30 cryptanalysts had worked full-time for 2 years, even consulting universities, yet found nothing. Captain Minoru Yamada said, "By late 1943, we knew it was a Native American language, but we couldn't identify which one." Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Fukumoto admitted, "Using a native language was so simple, so elegant, we never even thought of it." In the 1990s, Japanese photographer Kenji Kawano began documenting surviving code talkers, and his exhibitions in Tokyo and Hiroshima moved audiences deeply. During one event, Albert Smith, a Navajo Code Talker, told the Japanese crowd, "We were both warriors. My language helped defeat you, but now it helps us understand each other." By 2010, the Japanese Association of Intelligence Studies hosted a symposium where Admiral Hiroaki Arb declared, "The Navajo Code represents perfect encryption. We had Asia's best codebreakers. Yet we were completely defeated." Chester Nez, the last of the original 29 Navajo Code Talkers, passed away on June 4, 2014. Today, only 2 code talkers remain from the nearly 400 who served, Thomas H. B. and Peter MacDonald. Though not among the original 29, both played key roles in making the code work in battle. At age 96, Peter MacDonald still speaks about their mission. "We showed that America's strength comes from diversity. Our different languages and cultures make us stronger." The Navajo language, once punished and suppressed, is now recognized as a national asset. Federal programs reference the Code Talkers' story, and young Native Americans study their ancestral languages with pride. Dr. Jennifer Dennett-Dale explained it best. "The Code Talkers changed how Native Americans see themselves, and how America sees them. They proved our languages aren't relics of the past, but living, powerful tools." The Navajo Code Talkers pulled off one of military history's greatest achievements, creating an unbreakable code that the Japanese could never decipher during World War II. Between 375 and 420 Navajo Marines sent tens of thousands of flawless messages under fire, each one saving lives. But their real victory went beyond tactics. It was symbolic. They used a language the U.S. government once tried to erase to defend the very nation that silenced them. Young Native men from communities long ignored ended up providing a capability that even America's most advanced allies couldn't match. Japan's failure wasn't just a military loss. It was a blind spot of ideology. They expected American machines, not American diversity. They couldn't imagine that the strength of their enemy came from cultures and languages they considered beneath them. In the end, the empire that preached racial superiority was undone, in part, by the voices of men it could never understand. The Code Talkers proved that America's greatest power isn't its factories or weapons. It's its people and the richness of their differences. The very language once banned in boarding schools became the key to victory in the Pacific. Now, as the last Code Talkers pass into history, their story remains a living reminder. Diversity isn't America's weakness, it's her greatest strength. Their legacy still lives on. The language once forbidden is now taught with pride. Native American veterans are finally recognized for serving at the highest per capita rates of any group. The idea that diversity strengthens national security is now a cornerstone of American belief. The voices that once spoke Navajo across the Pacific battlefields carried more than just military orders. They carried a message that transcends war. America's strength comes from many voices. Different peoples, different languages, united in purpose, strengthened by difference. The unbroken code stands as lasting proof that our differences aren't weaknesses, but sources of strength to cherish, protect, and use in the defense of freedom. Even the Japanese intelligence officers who failed to break the code understood its deeper meaning. Their defeat revealed a truth far beyond warfare. Some codes can't be cracked, not because they're complex in mathematics, but because they're born from the infinite complexity of human culture. The Code Talkers sent messages Japan never decoded, but their greatest message was one the whole world could understand. Diversity brings strength. Culture brings power. Indigenous knowledge has a place in the modern world. Those young Navajo men who once used their sacred language as a weapon, and later as an instrument of peace, proved something timeless. That America's greatest encryption is diversity itself. Unbreakable because it rises from limitless human experience and wisdom. the unbroken code still lives today. In every native child proudly speaking their ancestral language. In every recognition that minority voices strengthen national identity. In every understanding that our differences make us stronger together. The Code Talkers left behind eternal proof. Many voices, many peoples, many languages, united yet diverse. Together they create the unbreakable code of freedom itself.